Hello, I am so glad you're here. I am Jennifer Regular, the Soul Illuminator at Lighting the Path, and I get to co-host Getting Real with the Spiritual with Monica Henderson from MinkLife Motivation. And today our guest, Sophia Soul, is here joining us from Newcastle, Australia, where we get to have this amazing conversation about what we don't know because Monica's going to pick it right out of the fishbowl. There's no spiritual jargon here. This is casual, getting real kind of conversation about spiritual topics, about our practices, what challenges us, what we incorporate into our day, and how we integrate that into our life. And so let's get started.
Yes. Okay. So our topic for today is dun, da, 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 Indigenous teachings.
Ooh, okay.
Wow.
Yes. So we have no idea where this conversation is going. We didn't know we were having it today, but that's the beauty of this. And so Indigenous teachings is just that. But sometimes what's beautiful about this conversation is we're all
Monica's lost her sound a little bit there, so I'll just share that Indigenous teachings is our topic for today. It's really interesting for me because I am Canadian with South African roots. So Indigenous for me would be like African shaman kind of teachings, and Sophia's in Australia, so like the Aboriginal teachings there, and then Monica's in California. So then there's the Native American teachings as well. And we have that in Canada too. So this is going to be an interesting topic today. Monica,
Yeah.
are you back with us?
I hope my audio is back.
There
Yes.
we go. Yeah, I can hear you.
Very cool. Yes. So I think I heard you say that we all have different variations of indigenous.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I'm going to start us off with, I guess, the first question, which is, do you use indigenous teachings in your spiritual practice? And we're going to start with you, of course, our guest.
Do I use Indigenous teachings? I think if you go back to the beginning, and I can't even say the beginning of Indigenous times because it always has been. Do I use Australian Indigenous practices in my teachings in my practices? Probably not, because I don't know enough about them, right? But for me, Indigenous is connecting with one, connecting with the universe, connecting with nature. Because that to me is the same with all cultures, wherever you are. Right? And that I use very much in my practices. Yes, love it. Just being at one with nature and going out and connecting with the plants, with the trees, with the animals. Yes, that part of it. Absolutely.
What about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, well, hearing Sophia talk, it just reminds me of the sacredness, of our deep connection with all our relations and all of creation, too, right? And how much they can teach us. For Indigenous teachings, I love Native spirituality. I have a really strong kinship with Native spirituality, but I'm also really conscious of, especially these days, of cultural appropriation. And so it's a little tricky now because you don't want to do the wrong thing or offend anyone, and you want to have such a deep respect for the teachings. And I had the privilege of sitting around elders, native elders, that we now call Indigenous in Canada, learning about all the different ways of knowing and ways of living and connection, and the deep sacredness is what I think about, just having a deep respect for nature, for the trees and for the stone people, which are the rocks and the grandfather stones that we put in the sweat lodge. And, so I've had practices where I've been in the sweat lodge, where I've done pipe ceremony. Actually, it was an Indigenous elder that did a private pipe ceremony for me that gave me my spirit name. And in English, it is Loving Wolf Star. And so I was using that name for quite a while when I had other business practices. I love the sunrise ceremonies. I love all of the ways that there is that ceremony, there is that ritual, there is that sacred deep connection, there is a preparation. I love that the Thanksgiving address is given before any kind of event, that there's an opening and that there's also a closing. And I love that aspect of it. And this is kind of what I created in my practice, I guess, is like how I open the day and how I complete the day. Having that kind of ceremony, or using the sacred medicines like cedar and sweetgrass and sandalwood and bear root and white sage, of course, right? For cleansing and clearing and the restorative practices in that. So I think there's a lot that I have little bits of throughout my life, but mostly it's a learning from those who, carry the teaching in the oral tradition. What about you, Monica?
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking that it's so this is going to sound like completely off topic, but it does make sense to this topic. So when we travel, my family, my husband, my daughter, and I came to the conclusion that instead of bringing back a bunch of souvenirs and a bunch of stuff, right, like that we would bring back one magnet that represents our time there, right? Like just one magnet that represents your time there, stories, pictures, but really, as far as like a physical thing, that we would bring back this one magnet. And when you were saying that, it's like I kind of have done that also with a little bit of my own spiritual practice studies, in kind of being not necessarily like appropriating or taking on that particular teaching or that particular way of life, but kind of bringing back into my spiritual practice like one little piece that is representative of that overarching experience that I had. And so, in some ways, yes, my years of my poor broke college student years, when I sat in Borders trying to figure out like, okay, let's figure this thing out called spirituality, let's figure this thing out called religion. And I did do some reading in what the more indigenous principles were. There was the one piece that I took away the strongest that actually directly connected into my understanding of the my home language, which was Christianity at the time. My home language for the soul was Christianity. Was that God is in everything, right? And because God is in everything, you have to treat everything with the ultimate in respect. And so that is the big, I guess, magnet that I brought back from my little adventure into and exploring Indigenous teachings, which was really about kind of this concept of most of us just kind of look at other people and say, well, we have to respect others, right? Some of us will even go as far as to say, well, we have to respect nature as well. But very few of us take that all the way to the ends of it and saying everything that exists that I can see, touch, feel, experience deserves the same respect as God,
Mhm.
right? And so that became kind of one of my like pillars of what my faith was rooted in, was that one little piece that I took away from my journey into that space. So I guess the short answer is yes, I do use Indigenous teaching.
I know sometimes don't really realize how or why until we actually, yeah, reflect and contemplate it and
Yeah.
acknowledge what it is. Like, even now, I'm like, all of the things are coming back to me, right? Like, I mentioned about South African roots and how I got to meet an African shaman, Mandaza, who was here visiting several years ago, and he travels the world and he carries the teachings of African indigenous
Hmm.
tribes and so on. And so we had Dares, right, which is like a sacred council sitting around. And when I think of that and I think of the indigenous teachings, the native spirituality kind of teachings that I experienced, it was also about us coming together,
Hmm.
how we can live and work together and how we create community together,
Hmm.
And I remember one of Mandaza's questions to us was, what needs healing? And
Hmm.
then how can we heal that? So asking those deeper questions and coming together that would support a more collaborative, cooperative, loving way of life. And even in some of my card practices that I have, I've been using the Sacred Path cards for many years, which is all based on Indigenous teachings. And so I learned a lot through that as well over the years, and what each of the lessons were and how to apply that in my life. So sometimes, well, I always do, for many years now, I've been doing solstice and equinox spreads with the Sacred Path cards. So it looks into the lessons I'd be learning, what I might be challenged by, what might support me in those challenges, and incorporate that into my daily life. And sometimes there'll be a spread for a particular situation or for a daily lesson, to really incorporate those practices and those teachings in everyday life. And the Native Spirit cards from Denise Lynn is also something that I really like to do. And I'll do a medicine wheel spread for that. And even when, now it's all coming back to me. I love the medicine wheel teachings, actually, and the diversity that's incorporated into them as well. But then even what the meaning of the directions and the allies and adversaries and the teachings of each of the directions. And, of course, I have my shamanic drum because I practice shamanism as well. And then being able to use those kind of tools and practices to help keep us connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sophia, did you have any insights on what she was saying?
Oh, I just love everything that Jennifer's talking about, and I think I might come over there and stay with Jennifer for a while. But no, it's so true. It's just getting back into nature, and for me, and I, like you don't think of because I rise before the sun,
Mm.
and an Indigenous practice in all cultures, and the sunrises and the sunsets, and taking that energy of the beginning of the day, and then also the energy of the end of the daylight that we know it of, and really using that in our time, in our daily time schedules, because it makes so much sense. Our Indigenous cultures, they don't live by the man-made clock that we've got, and they don't even know about daylight saving, which we've just gone through. So it's a bit of a topic at the moment because we've just gone through, and I know you guys are going to go through it soon. But the Indigenous cultures are one with nature. So, they go with the sunrise and the sunset and the moon cycle, all the different cycles of the moons and everything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, recently, I've been in like deep discovery with Regina Curtis, and we've been kind of in deep discovery about what is this play that's happening with the external energy of the seasons that are happening around us and the nature that's happening around us, and what is our internal nature is. And what's really funny is I was in the car we were doing grocery shopping right before this, and my daughter was talking about how she thinks that there isn't going to be a creative renaissance. Like right now, it feels creativity has been um, kind of squashed because we're no longer in rhythm, right? Like we're no longer feeling feelings, we're no longer feeling pain, we're medicating. As soon as we have a pain, we medicate. As soon as we're bored, we go get a device. As soon as we're anything, right? Like there's this removal, like a removal from the nature that we are currently existing and we're
Yes.
feeling. And so in order for true creativity and true flow to happen, you have to feel all of the ebbs and flows, right? You have to feel the highs and the lows. And she's like, I don't think it's going to happen because we're all living in a false sense of security, because when there's a pain, I can fix it. When I'm hungry, I can just go grab something, anything, put it in my mouth. I'm no longer hungry. If I feel my feelings bad, there's a substance there to help me avoid it, right? And so since I don't have to feel any of those things, I don't get any of the full beauty of humanity. And
Yeah.
therefore creativity is starting to wane. And she's like, I don't think we're gonna get any good music.
We're
we
not.
were it was specifically about music is the conversation we were having, but she's like, I don't think we're gonna get any good music because no one's really living life. And I would have thought that the pandemic would have caused enough angst in us to be able to kind of push that creativity forward. in
Mm.
order for us to kind of innovate and create and things of that sort. But when she said that to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I love your brain. One, but two, also she was right. She's that because we are so detached from the natural rhythm of life, we can't experience the full beauty of it either and be able to express the full beauty of it either. And so we are going to have essentially dark ages in all of those things that we love, music and art and creativity in this way, because no one is tapping into the pain as well as the elation, right? They're all numb. So when you're numb, you don't feel anything.
We live in a world, I believe, of technology. And in one way, technology has helped us so much. I mean, it's bringing the world closer. We get to talk through technology and so much, so
Yes.
much.
We're
And I really thought, like, in the pandemic was a big lesson that we had to slow down. Unfortunately, we didn't get that lesson because technology has made our lives so much fuller, as in with all the things we have to do, that we've gone away from our true nature, our indigenous ways. And
yeah,
what I mean indigenous is it's innate within us all.
Mhm.
And I admit I sit on a computer for 14 hours a day at the moment. That's not all, but at the moment. But therefore, that innate ways has all been suppressed.
Mm.
Still there,
Mhm.
but it's all been suppressed.
yeah,
And now it's just allowing it to come back out. But yeah,
And
yeah,
so has the Indigenous teachings, right? Their
yes,
voices, their language, the teachings have been suppressed, and now it's
yes,
starting to come back.
yeah.
yes,
Well, there is the I guess the evolutionary law, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so
yes,
if we don't do something about this sooner rather than later, if we don't start feeling feelings, if we don't start tapping back into our own rhythm, right? I mean, in our bodies, they have a rhythm, right? Like the blood flows through it creates a rhythm. Like there is a actual rhythm to all of it. And if we don't start tapping back in, we may lose the opportunity to really kind of experience it. And I think this is why, although the age of the 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 life expectancy has gone up over hundreds of years of time, in the last few years, they're starting to start shrinking back down, and people are dying younger because we are medicating our way out of the full life experience, which means um, we won't be able to enjoy the fullest version of our lives. And I suspect we are easily meant to live until 108, but that is not where we're living to at this point in time. Yeah,
yeah. Choosing to have other experiences
yeah,
instead of the natural ways. But yeah, yeah, and
absolutely.
that's a and yes, the life isn't there. In the I mean, I really believe life in the Himalayas. People who live in the Himalayas and all those cultures, those indigenous cultures, they are living to
Hmm.
well over 100, but they're not caught up in the 3D world. They're
No,
not influenced by all the drugs and the medication that's available, and all of technology. And also, I know in even Asia, in China and Japan, they live long, long ages, but it's the
yeah,
same. It's the same. They live natural lives.
yeah,
They don't put themselves under so much stress that we do, and they have their traditional medicines.
Mhm.
That's one thing about Indigenous cultures and stuff that I do try and do. All your traditional, that nature provides us with everything we need.
Yes.
yeah,
Right, totally everything we need. But instead, we choose to take the quick way and go get a pill.
yeah,
And I know there's medication that's necessary for some things, and there are
absolutely.
times, I've got a friend who's very similar and doesn't like taking medication, but she's just broken her ankle in 5 places
Mm.
and is in extreme pain. And I'm going, well,
It might be time.
there are times, that's why the medication is there. But we also live in a world, as we all know, that people take all these medications when they don't really need it.
Yeah.
Where if we go back to the natural ways, I mean, I did a lot of sound healing, because I've gone from being in extreme pain and taking a lot of narcotics to completely opposite, to taking no medication, doing all natural things, including sound healing, which is indigenous again to us all, to all cultures. Use sound as
Yeah.
a healing tool, a healing modality, and no pain. It takes away the pain. You don't need a
Yeah.
drug.
Mm.
Yeah. I broke my ankle in 3 places. I have 10 screws. I have 8 screws and 2 plates in my
Yeah.
ankle currently, and literally, um, the offer immediately when I got to the hospital was like, "Well, I can give you this like extreme like narcotic, right?" And I was like, "No, thank you. I'll take some Tylenol or some ibuprofen." And they're like, "Are you sure?" I mean, it's you did a good job of breaking it. I mean, like this would be a great time to do that. And I just thought of, well, there are other ways to manage pain,
Yeah.
right? And if I can knock the edge off, feeling some pain is not a problem. It's feeling the original pain. Like when I first went to stand up, it was so much pain that I was starting to black out a little. And so it's like, well, I don't want to be blackout pain, but I need it manageable, right? Like I just need just enough pain so that I can know I did something that was really stupid. Or like, oh, I'm not supposed to step on it like that. That is dangerous. But not enough pain to where, sitting still, I'm like completely in discomfort. And then when I had my surgery and they added all of the screws and things of that sort, I think it was like 80 pills of Norco they gave me, and I didn't take a single one because there was two things that came across my mind. One was our bodies are miraculous healing machines, right? They were designed to heal themselves, right?
Yes.
So if I take this, is it going to enhance the healing experience or is it going to delay the healing experience?
Mm.
Is it going to impair my body from doing what it naturally does, or is it going to support it doing what it does? And I just didn't feel like it was going to support it. It was really just for my own comfort. And
Mm.
so in that pain management, I decided to just stick with the extra strength ibuprofen or the hospital grade ibuprofen, right? Like so it wasn't quite like the little pills we get over the counter, but it was a bit. I think it was like 800 milligrams or something for one pill. But instead that I would kind of do things that were really going to be supportive of my healing, right? It was going to be um, getting a lot of sleep. It was going to be hydrating completely. It was going to be like taking plant medicine in the way of actually eating foods that were like helping my body do what it needed to do. And then it would be the like allowing it to just be hurt and be okay for it to be hurt, right? Like, yeah, I broke it, it should hurt. Like I broke it, I should stay still, right? And so just kind of staying in that space and really honoring the body to allow it to do what it needed to do in order to support my healing. And I healed pretty quickly, and I was able to walk pretty quickly. And the therapists were like, "Here are the exercises," and I did the exercises, and then I worked out. Um, and so I believe that yes, the earth has everything that we need in order to be successful in healing, and so does our bodies. And when we don't allow any of that to happen naturally, we lose the ability to do that. We lose our magic. We are magical beings, and we lose it because we're not using it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we're 5 minutes out, so we have to ask the last question. I'm sure we could talk all day.
Sure, we could too.
But my last question is, how would what advice would you give, or how would you encourage someone to add Indigenous teachings into their spiritual practice?
For me, it's really it really goes down to the choice that to the life that I live, and that's my like the choice, the way that I want to live. I can choose to live in this 3D world, right? As in getting caught up in technology and all of life and allowing life to affect me, and therefore probably living a pretty stressful life
Mm-hmm.
and not a real happy life because it's just the same thing every day. Um, Absolutely. Or I can choose that I want something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's finding what practices suit me, wherever they're from, whatever they are, whether it's rising before the sun or sleeping just after the sun, whether it's native or natural medicines that the earth gives us, or whatever practices that really help me. So it depends on how do I want to live my life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it really comes down to me. And I ask myself that every day.
Mm-hmm.
How do I want to live today? Not for anyone else, but for me.
For you. I love that. That's so good.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing.
That's good. I hear choice. You
Yes.
have a choice. I love
Yes.
it. Okay, Jen, what about you?
I'm a huge advocate of spiritual wellness, so I'm going to go there with my answer, and that's really to get to know and understand, and if you're already familiar, then more deeply understand your indigenous culture,
Mm,
your ancestry, what is common in your customs and traditions of your culture and ancestry. What are the teachings that, like you said, Monica, that support your health and well-being?
mm-hmm.
Are the traditions in food and celebration and the coming together and community? What kind of cultural conditions support that? Right. So learning about what those are, because I think that having that kind of understanding and deeper connection to that knowledge and that wisdom can really support how we live our life and in the way that we can actually thrive in it, because that's true and natural for us. It's
Yeah.
in our blood, you know? What
Yeah.
do you, Monica?
I would probably say get curious. I know sometimes we get so entrenched in our own culture, in like our own home soul language, that we don't find enough curiosity about what someone else's experience is. And it does kind of like close off your experience in like connecting with the divine. But what I have found, especially because I kind of see myself as a little bit of a either in an ambassador or like a nomad when it comes to spirituality, where it's like I don't have a home, they're all my home and none of them are my home all at the same time. um, what I found is coming into any experience with curiosity, and trying to find the beauty in it as it is, as opposed to putting my own lens and color on like or opinion on it. I have really kind of been able to add to my spiritual practice in beautiful ways, and also kind of deepen my understanding of what my beliefs are, by being curious about someone else's beliefs and how they're celebrating or practicing, or all of those things. And when that happens, sometimes you might even find a soul language that was not the one that you came up in, but is one that speaks to your soul a little better than the original home language, right? And so I would say definitely be curious, and come in with this curiosity of like wow, like please tell me, because I have been able to find God everywhere. Right? I've been able to find God in outdoor sanctuaries and indoor sanctuaries and mosques, in temples, in people's homes. in rock songs, if you're open enough to finding your creator everywhere, you will see that your creator is everywhere, which is very much an indigenous teaching. So, with that, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Sophia, for being a part of this conversation with us.
Thank you.
Thank
How
you,
can people
Sophie.
find you?
Sacredyou.love.
Oh,
Basically, sacred you, as in you, the letter U, sacred you, the university, whatever, sacred you dot love.
oh, love it. We will make sure we add that in the notes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Did you have any last thoughts or anything you needed to add before we go?
Oh, I just love seeing people's comments, what indigenous means to them, what are some of their teachings, and what you related or didn't relate to in this conversation. I'd love to hear that in the comments.
Yes. And in final, I know we're over just a little, but in my final thought, I would say just check out the show notes or the caption to this post, as there is a link to be able to keep it real with the spiritual by coming and hanging out with us in our meetup. It's every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And it'll allow you to share what you are doing in your spiritual practice and hear what others are doing in theirs, so that you can have a sacred communion and share, take what works for you, give away what doesn't, and really kind of deepen your spirituality in a loving, secure hug of a group. So with that, we want to say thank you for getting real with the spiritual. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.